Section 26 of the Golden Web by Phillips OPPENHEIM. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Book 2, Chapter 5. Mutual Information. The girl was sitting in the middle of a hard horsehair sofa, her elbows upon her knees, her head resting in her hands. She looked across the dreary apartment and out of the ill-cleaned windows, with dull, despairing eyes. This, then, was to be the end of her dreams. She must go back to the life which she felt to be intolerable, or she must throw herself headlong into the maelstrom. There was one other occupant of the room, and curiously enough his attitude appeared to be a somewhat similar one. He was a short, thick-set young man, with brown mustache, flashily dressed, with a red tie, an imitation diamond, and soiled linen to further disfigure an appearance at no time particularly prepossessing. He was standing with his legs a little apart, looking out into the uninspiring street. His hands were thrust deep down into the pockets of his trousers. He had all the appearance of a man who finds the burden of life an unwelcome thing. Presently he began to whistle, not cheerfully, but some doleful air of sentimental import. The girl upon the couch seemed irritated. She herself was in the last stage of dejection, and the sound grew maddening. "Oh, don't do that, please!" she exclaimed at last. He turned around in amazement, for the first time realizing that he was not alone. "I beg your pardon," he said. The girl remembered that he was a stranger to her, but after all, what did it matter? "I asked you to stop whistling," she said. He answered, "Certainly," and continued to look at her. She returned his gaze with a disapprobation which she scarcely attempted to conceal. "Sort of a habit I get into," he explained, "when I'm in the dumps." "Does it do you any good?" she asked. "If so, I'll learn how to whistle myself." "Meaning," he remarked, "that we are companions in dumpiness?" She shrugged her shoulders, but did not trouble to reply. "I wish to God," he exclaimed, "I'd never left Cape Town." Then for the first time she looked at him with a gleam of interest and asked, "Do you come from South Africa?" He nodded. "I did, and I only wish I were back there. I could always keep my head above water there, but London is a rotten hole. I suppose it's because I don't know the runs," he added meditatively. "Anyhow, it broke me." She continued the conversation without feeling the slightest interest in it, but simply because it was an escape, a temporary escape from her thoughts. "What did you come over for?" she asked. "A fool's errand," he answered. "I lent a man some money, a sort of speculation it was, and I came over to see how he was getting on." "And I suppose he lost it," she remarked. "He lost himself," answered the man, "which is about as bad. I wish I could lay my hands upon him. I'd get a bit of my own back, one way or another." "London is a big place," she returned. "People are not easy to find unless you know all about them. This man left South Africa only a month or so ago. He gave me an address here where he said I should always hear of him. I've been there nearly every day. He turned up there all right regularly after he first landed. He hasn't been there at all for 2 months, and they haven't the least idea where he is." "You don't even know," she asked, "whether the speculation is successful or not?" He shook his head gloomily. "It don't make much odds, so far as I can see," he said. "If it came off, he's bolted with the profits. If it didn't, he's hiding for fear I shall want my money back again. It's a rotten sort of show, anyway." "What was his name?" she asked idly. "His real name," the man answered, "was the same as your own. That is," he added, "I think I heard old Miss Towsley call you Miss Sinclair, didn't I?" She looked at him steadily for several moments without speaking. He was not a person of quick apprehensions, but even he could not fail to see the change in her face. Her lips were parted, her eyes were suddenly lit with an almost passionate fire. The change in her features was illuminating. She was no longer a tired, depressed-looking young woman of ill-tempered appearance. Her good looks had reasserted themselves. Life seemed to have been breathed into her pulses. "His real name was Sinclair," she repeated softly. He came from South Africa. Tell me some more about him." "Why?" he asked bluntly. "Because," she told him, "my name is Ruby Sinclair, and I'm here on very much the same errand as you, only with this difference," she added. "I know where my uncle is. I know what has become of him. There are other things for which I seek." He came over from the window and stood on the hearthrug by her side. Some part of her excitement had become communicated to him. "I say," he exclaimed, "this is a rum go, and no mistake. If it's the same man, we may be able to help one another. It's Richard Sinclair I'm looking for, called over there Bully Sinclair. He was a man about 50 years old. Been in South Africa for the last 20 years. A mine prospector and a general adventurer. He had his fingers in a good many pies, had Richard." "What was he over in England for?" she asked. The young man hesitated. "I don't know that there's any harm in telling you," he said. "Only remember, it's information for information. I'm giving you the whole show away." "I'll tell you all you want to know," she interrupted. "Go on." "Well," the young man said, "he came over to lay claim to a gold mine that he considered he'd been done out of." "A gold mine?" the girl repeated breathlessly. "Was it a rich one? Very rich, I mean?" "I should say so," the young man answered. "It was a complicated bit of business. The mine's in other hands, you see, but Sinclair reckoned that he'd got a claim on it, anyway, and he expected either to be squared for a big amount or to get a syndicate to take the thing up. He came to me dead on his uppers. My name's Hefferom. He and I had been pretty thick at odd times, and though we'd been in a good many deals together, we kept friends in a way. He came to me, as I say in Cape Town, and he told me what the game was. He wanted a matter of £200 or £300 to get over to this side and to start things properly. Well, I thought it out, and though it was about all I was worth in the world, I let him have it. Over he comes. I got a letter from him to say he'd landed, and never another line. I cabled. No answer. I came over myself, for he scarcely left Cape Town before a little affair that I was mixed up in went plumb wrong, and I lost every penny I'd got left. So over here I come, and I've been here a fortnight, and I tell you Sinclair seems to have vanished from the face of the earth. The worst of it is," he continued, "I'm stony broke. I've got to leave this place today because I can't pay my bill, and I've no idea where to raise a sovereign." The girl's sense of humor triumphed for a second over her excitement. "There are your diamonds," she reminded him. "I heard you talking about them at dinner the other night. One of them, you said, was worth £100. "A bluff," he answered readily. "They're false, every one of them. I talked like that to get old Mother Townsley to let my account go on a bit, but she wasn't having any. Now I say I've told you my story. Tell me why you are so keen on knowing about it." "Yes," she said, "I will tell you. My name is Ruby Sinclair, and I'm the niece of the man whom you have come to England to find." He made use of an oath for which he forgot even to apologize. "You know where he is?" he exclaimed. "Come, remember it was fair bargain. Information for information." "He's dead." The young man staggered back. His first emotion of shocked surprise lasted only a few seconds. Anger and disappointment took its place. "Dead!" he exclaimed. "And my money? What about that? What he left belongs to me anyway. It's got to be made up. I can show you his note for it." "You'd better wait," she answered coldly, "until I have told you everything. I suppose you don't read the papers?" "Never," he answered. "What good are they to me?" "They might have been some use on the present occasion," she answered. "They might at any rate have saved you from wasting a good deal of time. My uncle was murdered in the Hotel Universal by a man named Rowan." The young man swore again, fluently, volubly, swore until he had come to the end of a varied and extensive vocabulary. When he had finished there was an excited flush in his cheeks and a bright light in his eyes. "By Rowan? Basil Rowan?" he exclaimed. "He was one of us out there when we were prospecting up the Newley Valley. Look here," he continued, "you and I have got to have this out. Murdered, was he? Well, I'm the man that may be able to throw some light upon that. What happened to Rowan? Had he anything to say? I will tell you all that I know, the girl answered. My uncle wrote me directly he arrived in England. He told me that he had been fortunate in Africa, that he had come to take possession of a large fortune, and that he would be sending for me in a very short time to live with him, and that, as he had no other relative, I should be rich all my days. I replied, of course, asking whether I could not come at once. He wrote me again to tell me to wait for a day or two until his affairs were settled. Then I heard no more. I waited. I wrote again. I waited and wrote again. There was no reply. I found afterwards that my letters had never been called for at the address where he had told me to write. Then one day a stranger who was staying at Rackney told my uncle there to look at the papers. We found the story of his murder. He had been dead some time. Rowan was tried, I suppose, the man asked. Did he say what his motive was? Has he been hanged? He insisted upon it that it was a quarrel, the girl said. I do not believe him. He was found guilty and reprieved. I saw in the papers last night that he had been released. I believe that he has only a few days to live. And you? The young man asked. I came up, the girl said slowly, to take possession of my uncle's effects. Have you got them? He asked breathlessly. Yes, the girl answered. There were papers? He demanded. Some, she answered, but none of any importance. He looked at her suspiciously. She shrugged her shoulders. Look here, she said. I'm telling you the truth. Look at me. Look at my gloves, mended half a dozen times. Look at my clothes, just hanging on my back and no more. If there had been a single thing amongst my uncle's papers on which I could have raised even a £5 note, do you think I should be sitting here like this, wondering which might be the quickest way out of the world? The young man moistened his lips. He was obviously in a state of excitement. Listen, he said. Among these papers, was there a sort of deed on yellow parchment paper, roughly written, with a government stamp in the left-hand corner, a paper which spoke of a gold mine called the Little Anna Gold Mine? She shook her head decidedly. There was nothing of the sort. Then the young man swore again, and this time he seemed to surpass himself. Your uncle was robbed, he exclaimed. Robbed of that paper, I tell you, he added. He was murdered for it, and for no other reason. How do you know? The girl cried. Why, it's as simple as ABC, he explained. He had the paper in his possession when he came to England. The mine has been claimed by a great syndicate who are working it now. He came to see them to make terms. The next thing we hear is that he is murdered and the paper is gone. They thought that no one else knew of it. Young lady, he exclaimed, you may thank your stars, as I do, that you and me have come together. We'll have justice, and we'll have that fortune yet. End of section 26.